chat. You and me, we're going out, catch a later sound. Guaranteed to blow your mind so high you won't come down. Hey, y'all, prepare yourself for the rubber band. Man, you ever heard a sound like a rubber band? Man, you're bound to lose control when the rubber band starts to jam. Ooh-wee! Boy's out of sight. And everything he does seems to come out right. Once I went to hear him play at a club outside of town. I was so surprised, I was hypnotized. Sound this cat put down. When I saw this short.
Okay, hi there. Today I'm going to be looking at, for Algebra 1, Chapter 10-4, Day 1, because it's going to be a 2-day topic, solving radical equations. So the first problem I'm going to do is this one. The square root of x plus 7 equals 16. All right, so I'm going to give you a strategy on the side over here. The first thing you want to do is, when you have these, is get the square root alone on one side of the equation, okay? So I want to get that square root of x alone, which means what's in the way of having it alone? Well, the plus 7 is in the way of having that alone. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. Sorry, the opposite of adding 7 will be subtracting 7. So if I do that, those cancel, and I'm left with the square root of x equals 16 minus 7 is 9. Okay, now remember the opposite operation of taking the square root would be taking the second power. So I'm going to square both sides. And the square root of x squared, or the square root of x to the second power, is square root of x times the square root of x, which is x. And 9 squared is 81. All right, and that is the answer. Okay. If you got questions, please bring it to class. Number 2. A little trickier. 2 times the square root of x over 3.3 equals 3. Okay. So along the same line, same strategy. I want to try to get that square root and whatever's under it all alone. I want to get that part alone. So in order for me to do that, I want to get rid of that 2. Okay, so the 2 is in the way. Therefore, and remember, there's an implied multiplication between the 2 and that whole radical. So the opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. I know this looks messy, but it's actually really not bad at all. So square root of x over 3.3. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. Okay, next. I've got the radical and what's left and what's underneath it all alone. So now I'm going to square both sides. Actually, that should probably be my second step over here. If I go back to my steps, let's write this. 1, get the square root all alone. 2, square both sides. Three should really be check your answer. Okay, all right, so there are the steps. I should go back over here just to, because I said check the answer and then I didn't do it. So I'll do it over here, I'll do it in brown. So if I take 81, square root of 81 plus 7, is that in fact 16? So square root of 81 is 9. 9 plus 7 equals 16. Yes, it does. Okay, so that one's good. All right, back to this. Now 1.5 squared, I think I might use a calculator there. 1.5 squared is 2.25. And remember, this square root and that second power cancel out, which means I get x over 3.3 equals 2.25. Okay, next, Remember that fraction bar right here is a division sign, which means the opposite of dividing by 3.3 is multiply by 3.3. Multiply both sides by 3.3. Those cancel. And I'm left with x equals 2.25 times 3 is 7.425, and I'll just leave it like that, okay? And that's the answer. Now I could always check it. Go plug it back in. 2 times the square root of 7.425 divided by 3.3. That better equal 1.5. Checking my calculator. So if I go 7.425 divided by 3.3, that's 2.25. The square root of 2.25 is 1.5. 1.5 times 2 is 3. It is 3. My problem is I actually wrote the problem down wrong. That should be a 3. So 3 equals 3. I'm good. All right. So I did most of my checking in my calculator there, but it worked. Okay. Let's see. That was number 2. Number 3. Square root of 5t minus 11 equals the square root of t plus 5. Okay. So this one looks pretty hard. Now my first step was, remember, it was get the square root all alone on one side of the equal sign. I've actually got the square root alone on one side of the equal sign. In fact, it's both sides. The opposite of taking the square root is taking it to the second power. So if I square both sides, the radicals and those second powers cancel out with each other, and I'm left with 5t minus 11 equals t plus 5. And boy, did that get easy quick, all right? So now I can just solve this. This is a simple linear equation. You've been solving these all year. Bring my variables to one side. I get 5t minus 1t is 4t minus 11 equals 5. Bring my numbers to the other side. Add 11. I get 4t equals 16. And divide by 4. T equals 4. And then you can check your answer and plug it back in. Make sure what you get. Square root of 5 times 4 minus 11. It better equal the square root of 4 plus 5. Let's see, that's 20 minus 11 is 9. Square root of 9 equals the square root of 9. I'm good, okay? All right, that's number 3. Number 4. This one's got some meat on it. N equals the square root of n plus 12. And the directions on this one will say solve and check for extraneous solutions. Okay. Extraneous solutions, I'll come back to that. But what that means is when you plug the answer back in, it doesn't work. It works when you solve it, but it doesn't work when you plug it back in. That's really, in a nutshell, what extraneous solution means. Okay, so to start this one, I've got the square root all alone on one side of the equal sign, okay? So I'm going to square both sides of this one, okay, and get rid of that radical. And what I'm left with is n squared equals n plus 12. Okay, so here we are. Now, this is a quadratic equation. We spent the whole last chapter, on chapter 9 or whatever it was, solving these. Anytime you've got an n squared and a regular n, and bring everything to one side and see what it looks like. So I'm going to do it in one move. I'm going to subtract n, and subtract 12 from both sides. And what I get is n squared minus n minus 12 equals, those all canceled over there, equals 0. Now I can solve this. Now, there's a couple ways you could solve this. You could do quadratic formula. You could also factor this. I always take a look at this because there's nothing in front of that n squared except for the good old implied 1. So I would take a look at negative 12. Can you find the factors of negative 12 that add up to the middle term, which in this case would be negative 1, because there's an implied 1 in front of there? It doesn't take long to realize that, 12, there's a couple of factors, 12 times 1, 6 times 2, or 4 times 3. And if I make that 4 negative, then it multiplies to negative 12 and adds up to negative 1, which means I can put my answers in here. N minus 4 and n plus 3 equals 0. I'm not done, I need to solve it, so I'm going to go n minus 4 equals 0 and n plus 3 equals 0. Add 4, get my answer of n equals 4. Subtract 3, I get my other answer. Excuse me. N equals negative 3. So those are my two answers. Now I'm not done because it said check for extraneous solutions. So I'm going to go take the original equation, and I need to do it twice. So I got n equals the square root of n plus 12. And I'm going to do it over here too with n equals the square root of n plus 12. And this will be for n equals 4. This one will be for n equals negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to just pop that in there. So I get 4 equals the square root of 4 plus 12. Negative 3 equals the square root of negative 3 plus 12. And we'll see what we get. This is the square root of 16 equals 4. Square root of 16 is 4. That one's good. This one over here, I get the square root of 9 equals negative 3. Square root of 9 is 3. Ooh, that one's a problem. This one's not okay, which means I'm throwing that answer out. There's only one answer, okay, of n equals 4. And you should cross out the other one. Or you could write next to it, we want to put an arrow, extraneous. You can do that. All right. But that answer, it's not a good answer. It didn't work when you plug it back in. And that happens sometimes. Usually in the directions they'll say check for extraneous solutions, but you should be doing it anyway. Okay. All right. So that was my almost last problem. I got one more. This last one is a U try, number 5. This one's a little easier, although it says, I do say check for extraneous solutions. And it's the square root of 3y plus 8 equals 2. All right. So why don't you solve that, do it out, and you can bring your answer to class. All right, and that's it. We'll go over that one in class if you like. And have a great night. Here is a little more music for you.
There's a man between his toes. Hey, I laughed so hard because the man got down when it finally reached his nose. Hey, rubber band man. You never heard a sound like rubber band. Oh, no, you're bound to lose control. Got that rubber band on his toes. And then he wiggled it up. Rubber on his nose. Guaranteed to blow your mind. keeping time. On the world,